Have you ever wanted to dive into the deepest parts of the ocean?
Well, today you will have that chance.
Are you holding your breath yet? Don't worry, let's dive together.
Ready? Let's go! Life is thriving just below the surface. At 20 meters, a new world opens up.
Shallow coral reefs are near the coast.
And look, there are people here too.
But these are professional divers. "40 meters is the maximum depth for them.
At 60 meters, we meet our first predator.
Orcas live in relatively shallow waters worldwide. They are top predators with no natural enemies.
At 70 meters, we find the whale shark.
The largest fish, weighing up to 60 tons. They can live up to 130 years.
At 100 meters, we see professional divers again.
They must be careful to avoid decompression sickness. At 120 meters, we find a giant octopus. They live in cool waters down to 2,000 meters. At 150 meters, we enter the twilight zone. Only 1% of sunlight reaches this depth. At 200 meters, we see a giant oarfish. These creatures inspired sea serpent legends. They can grow up to 11 meters long. At 300 meters, we find giant spider crabs. They are mostly legs, with small bodies.
At 500 meters, we see the blue whale. The largest animal in history.
They communicate over thousands of kilometers.
At 600 meters, we find the Sofar Channel.
At 830 meters, we pass the Burj Khalifa.
It would be completely submerged here.
At 900 meters, we find the giant squid. With eyes as big as dinner plates. At 1100 meters, we find West Mata volcano.
It last erupted in 2009.
At 1,280 meters, we see the great white shark. They don't need light to hunt. They hunt by smell.
Also, the leatherback turtle is here.
The largest turtle in the world. At 1,500 meters, we see giant fishing nets. They catch everything in their path. At 1,830 meters, we are in a deep canyon. At 2,000 meters, we find the black dragonfish.
It looks like a horror movie creature.
At 2,250 meters, we see the sperm whale.
The largest toothed whale in the world.
At 3,000 meters, we find deep-sea coral reefs.
They are beautiful and mysterious.
At 3,700 meters, we reach the average ocean depth. At 4,500 meters, we find the anglerfish. With its glowing lure and sharp teeth.
At 5,760 meters, we find the SS Rio Grande. It sank in 1941.
At 6,000 meters, we reach the Mariana Trench. At 7,900 meters, we find the snailfish. It's the deepest living fish. At 1,927 meters, we reach the Challenger Deep. We have reached the bottom of the Earth. There is still so much to discover.